Hey guys, what's up? It's currently a golden week in Japan. We are off quite a bit, so I have a lot of time to film. Also, we're obviously on lockdown and quarantine. I saw some people in the comments start to say, "Hey Sky, you're uploading too fast." Don't worry, I'm listening. I skipped a video yesterday to give myself a break, and I also am taking in what you guys are saying. And I want you to also realize that when quarantine ends, this isn't going to be 5 to 6 days a week of videos. I'm gonna make it probably one or two during the week and then only Saturday, Osoroshi Saturday. So don't worry, I'm not gonna burn myself out. I did kind of want to make sure people understood that I was really back, and I felt like the best way to do that was to put out a large group of videos that I'd been kind of saving up in my head up here, just all at once to kind of let know people I'm committed to this. Don't worry, I'm really back. So I think I've gotten my point across now that people are starting to say, whoa! And also, I don't want to spam your release on subscriptions. I know that can get annoying, so I apologize if that's happened to you. Let's get into the video today. We are going to do a life update on things I've been drawing. People have been asking me what I have been drawing in the time that I have been away from YouTube, and it's stayed consistent with a sort of fantasy, cyberpunk, I guess, grim dark technology, urban noir series of worlds that are inside of a galaxy that I made up. And that galaxy itself is a superposition, which is how do you define a superposition? A superposition is defined, if you look it up in the dictionary, yes, superposition is a real word. It's where all universes, realms, and planes collide at one point. It's a superposition of all those points. It's an apex, I guess, and zenith of all those connections. And that's kind of what the galaxy that I work on is. It's called Grimstar Galaxy, and it's ruled over by this god planet called Atherox. Yeah, this is all fantasy stuff. That's why you're seeing it in the background too. This is kind of the game room at my school that I'm inside of right now to kind of make the right sort of atmosphere for a video like this. Sorry if you were coming here today for a JFAQ. Check out my last video if that's what you wanted. This is just kind of more of a life update. And to hit up those people asking about, Scott, what have you been drawing? So in this video, I'm just gonna stream a bunch of the pictures of the different worlds, designs, ideas, and kind of go through them. I think what I'm gonna start to do is when I do update videos on my drawing and stuff on this channel is kind of continue to build the lore almost as I suppose, a video diary for myself, a lore diary or a lore lexicon or codex for my own creations. I've got most of them up here in my mind, and as you'll probably see with the drawings that I do today and show today, the conceptual aspects of these are actually written down next to the drawings themselves so that I can go back at any time and make sure I remember all the different aspects of these, but making a video like this can help too. So with that said, let's jump into it. I'm gonna try and give the first video a quick overview of how this world works. Yes, I've done a video like this a long time ago in the past on my old channel. I don't think there's a video on this channel that really covers what I've been working on. And for those of you who don't know me very well, or you're not familiar with my art, I've done stuff in the past where I did lots and lots of illustrations for tabletop, pen and paper gaming. I have done some video game stuff. I worked on some artwork for a RPG Maker game, which after 355 hours of putting the game together, it did some kind of mess up with the cloud sync and I lost all 355 hours forever. And I stopped working on that game because I couldn't get motivated to get back into somehow collecting a new 355 hours. I don't know, that one really hit me hard. I've never worked with that program again after that. The other one I've done is I've actually used Tyranno Builder, which is a visual novel game builder, and I did my own illustrations for a game revolving around the Japanese urban legend known as the 10-day dream, in which you get stuck in a dream that keeps looping for 10 days. Every night you have a different part of the dream, and if you don't proceed properly through the dream, you never escape and you're just stuck in it forever. And if you die in the dream, you die in real life, you know, just like IRL. And I think that about covers it as far as my video game and my pen and paper tabletop stuff goes. If you want to look into my past, if you actually look up Scott Ackerman or Scott Ackerman Illustrations, you can probably find most of my work. I used to mostly do illustrations for a very, very small publisher who I think is still publishing today. They're a good bunch of people. Goodman Games and the fantasy setting, because they have multiple settings. That's why I had trouble grasping how I should address this. The fantasy setting that I particularly did it for was one called Dungeon Crawl Classics, or DCC. It's like first edition Dungeons and Dragons, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, then I've just said a bunch of gibberish and weird, strange words and language that you're like, wow, what is this guy even talking about? He's crazy. So just continue to listen to the video as if you were listening to a crazy person. In my own world that I've been working on, it's been about a decade or so that I've worked on just this world. It started out with only, I guess, the God Planet that I borrowed, obviously, from the, what would you say it, like doomed cosmos or the cursed cosmic entities of old school chthonic mythology and, H.P. Lovecraft. I think all of us who've gotten into horror borrow something from there. And this is a close representation of what H.P. Lovecraft called, I hope I get this pronunciation right because his pronunciations are brutal, Azathoth. I hope I got that right. My version of Azathoth was not a mad, crazy god with a formless body and total insanity. He was instead a very well put together brainiac genius, god brain, planet brained, obviously literally, entity whose body is more so formed into an Orbis sort of shape. His actual race or species is called the Orbis. The Orbis omnipotent, which is like god planets, I guess is the best way to describe the race or species or whatever you would call it. And he and his lineage ruled over just the vast void of space for ages before any of this stuff came about. Then slowly I started to work on one planet after another, and I realized the reason I needed to work on multiple planets, maps, worlds, countries, races, classes, industry, governments, everything within this fantasy setting that I was making, fantasy future cyberpunk setting that I was making, was because I was never happy with just one. My first one was called Drathconia. Drathconia is the fantasy world. If you go there, no, you're not going to find the classical J.R.R. Tolkien, elves, dwarves, gnomes. I tried not to borrow any classic ideas like beat for beat. So, for example, even with my own god planet, I didn't call it Azathoth and be like, it's exactly like the chthonic god. No, I made my own version of that. I don't have any gnomes. I don't have any elves. I don't have any orcs. What I have is, on my fantasy planet, I have like people who are half alive, half dead, called the Felbor. I've got snake people who are called the Serpentinians. And what else? I've got like the highfalutin sort of high class ruling class that is too dominant, called the Ganathonians. The kind of more Nordic Viking type called the Yeomen. And there's many more. There's like, God, how do I explain it all? There's even, I guess, a representation of samurai and Asian culture in general lumped together into the Azurians, which they're literally an azure color, like their skin is. So on top of it, I've never tried to actually include any humans in any of my worlds because I felt like the second I get into humans, there's a possibility my world could be politicized. Like, oh, you're only making this because of this and this. So there are no humans. There are a race close to humans called the Sapioids or the Sapiens, but they are not human and their skin is gray. There's no white, black, brown, yellow, red, whatever. Their skin is gray. Aside from the Azurians, and the Azurians are not sapiens, they're actually some sort of elemental aspect of the world that they live in. Then there's also futuristic worlds, like grimdark sort of worlds, where of course, if you're doing grimdark, you're borrowing from the xenomorph mythology, you're borrowing from, of course, Warhammer 40k, and I believe xenomorphs came out before Warhammer 40k, if I'm correct. I know Warhammer 40k goes way far back, but If you don't know about that whole setting, it's in the future, there's only war and lots of technology has been lost. So we're kind of stuck with this sort of grimy, glitchy, burnt cut, husk-like technology. And that's what this world is. It's called Zedron Prime. It is the world that humans eventually became to inhabit long after Earth actually died. So at one point, yes, there were humans in my setting, but I killed them off a long time ago. I just said, humans lived on 3 different planets before my whole universe got started. They destroyed one because of waste and pollution and war, a second one, and then a third one. And then finally, the human race divided into 2 different ways. Synchronicity happened between technology and humans. If you don't know what that is, that's kind of when cybernetics merge with humanity, making a new race completely. That was the Zedrons. They left, they got away because they were so sick of the pollution, the war, and the wastefulness of humanity. That last planet was called Third Earth Command. Like I said, it was the third Earth, and they left for a planet that they then called Zedron Prime. So now they're a totally different type of race because over years and years, their technology has been corrupted because they've started to worship the god planet known as Atherox. He gives them their energy because, of course, to make a functional galaxy, you have to have an energy source usually in the middle. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a astronomist. I'm not great with anything science-y in general. I try to use as much as I really understand, and I know you need an energy source. So instead of just making there a glowing sun, I said that within this planet, this god planet, its eyes actually give off this sort of glowing light called void energy from the eyes that acts as the sun. So that's what we're at with that. Just to give you some quick samples of some of the other planets that I have, there is one that is almost like a hellscape, which is used as sort of a spiritual dimension between every other planet within this galaxy. It lingers somewhere between the mortal coil and the dead spiritual sort of semi-lucid world. It's called Necropocalyptica, and it's super grim. Like it's worse than anything you could imagine. I actually took most of the ideas that I got from that from a series of books I read called City Infernal, and that's not the Skyrim City Infernal books. It is the Edward Lee City Infernal books and Infernal Angel, and there's one other book in the series called like Infernal Priest or something like that, or House of Infernal. I forget what the third book is called, but I've read them a bunch of times. I've listened to the audiobooks a bunch of times. There's so many great ideas in those books that no one's ever put into a game before, and this is why I wanted to borrow some of them. Of course, I didn't borrow word for word. Like, for example, I don't have just demons. I didn't just borrow angels, okay? I made my own versions of these called the Demigorn and the Arcarians, and these are their own sort of angels and demons. They have more of a gray area too. They're not just like all demons are 100% really bad and all angels are always great. And they're always kind of warring over the souls that get eaten up in here. And this Necropocalyptica is like shaped like a funnel. And the reason that it is because as souls go in there, they feed them to the god planet Atherox, who literally survives off of eating souls. So the planets that worship him feed him the souls of their dead, and he in turn gives them void energy gifts that like warp them and change them into like kind of overpowered mutants. But then there is also a side that wants to fight this evil god and give the old ancestors of his family rule back over the entire galaxy. And they live in a place called the Genosphere. This is another really weird planet. The really odd thing about this is it was created by a super ancient alien race, and they're more or less like grays or ethereals if they didn't have these little squat bodies and fat gray heads and black eyes. Like they're more stretched out like a normal human. They've lived for millions of years and they kind of know what's best for the planet. They almost hover between divine and mortal, and they've over time started to help producing new races and species that they knew they could have on their side, fighting the sort of greedy wrath of Atherox. And that's why this is called the Genosphere. First of all, the Genosphere was completely what you would call man-made in a world with no men. It is, made by manual technology, people building it, or maybe robotic technology. I don't know how you want to say it, but it's artificial. It's completely artificial. It's an artificial planet, but it is the size of a planet. So imagine if you built a Death Star that wasn't made to blow up planets. Instead, it was made to breed and harvest the best of the best genes to make sort of superheroes to fight back against this god planet. And that's what the genosphere exists for. This is what you yourself would be playing in this world of worlds. You would be one of these characters created by these ancient aliens called simply the antediluvian, which I think, you know what that means, just super old. Or Methuselah, is that what you can also say? These antediluvian aliens who have created you. This allows you to choose like any race from any of the planets, any species, anything in between, half of one race or half of another, or the aspects you like of one. For me, I always felt like every role-playing game or world game that you should play, you should have like unlimited customization. I mean, down to like, every structure of your body, how your arms look, how your legs look, like, and then you should be able to easily change that later down the line as your character progresses, adding things onto it to fully customize your character within this game world that you're playing. Now, I realize this is probably nothing that's ever going to be turned into a video game. I don't have dreams of that because I feel like that would just be unimaginable. I mean, we're talking like levels of, what is that game called that's been worked on forever? Star Citizen. It's never been done, it's never been finished, and people are still buying spaceships that haven't even been modeled yet in a 3D modeler. So I'm not imagining this will ever turn into a game, but I want to one day have it played as an RPG. Now, you're probably thinking, Scott, these all sound like concepts. Have you ever put any rules or story or anything to it? Yes, I have. I've actually done a few comic books. One comic book I did was actually on the modern-based world called Ortho, which is our equivalent of Earth. Really, really creative there, Scott, right? Ortho. I liked Ortho because it had sort of a palindrome feel to it, where it looks the same backwards and forwards. That's why I chose the name Ortho, and I felt like it would bring up feelings of Earth. I like to really bring up a lot of feelings with every name you say. So on Ortho, that's where the gray race lives. They are actually people who decided to regress and go back to their Earth roots and left Zedron and actually regressed back technologically and physically to us as humans now, pretty much, but gray humans, or gray sapiens as I call them. And they live a life like we live. There's a modern city, but there's an area that has sort of this pull towards the dark side, a pull towards the dark energies, the void energy that comes from Atherox himself, and they're between Atherox and they're between that Necropocalyptica. So they have a very dark void running through their planet that is like kind of a, do you know what a syzygy is? It's when two planets line up, or all planets within a solar system line up. When that happens, a sort of rip in their reality opens up in a city called Metrodark. And in Metrodark, all things paranormal, I guess, what else? Paranormal, metaphysical, pataphysical, just insanity happens. So it just leaves an open window to bring anything into this world. And that can be everything from animatronics coming to life in like a, Five Nights at Freddy's type environment, or some characters that are almost like creepypasta characters. Like you'd have, Jeff the Killer or something. Even though I think Jeff the Killer is a horrible idea. I think the story is so bad. But what if you actually had a RPG or role-playing game based around trying to survive in a city where creepypasta characters like that tried to like hunt you down and kill you, and you were doing it in a modern day setting, and it was like very urban noir, sort of like, what is it called, like Night City and Cyberpunk, like that. That would be pretty awesome. Make it very crime ridden and like Gotham from Batman, but mix it with like creepypastas hunting you down, and you're the superhero from the genosphere that the antediluvians created. Last but not least, I got one more planet, and this is for the people, I guess, who don't want to get stuck playing a very, very, what would you say? A very, very archetypical character as far as like very humanoid or very superhero-esque, or even like cyberpunk or fantasy wizard fighter type. They're like, I don't like any of those. I want to be something that doesn't even walk on two legs and fight with weapons. I want a psionic bug or something crazy. So I've got another planet called Andromedan. And Andromedan is this really weird, desolate planet that was completely scorched by the void energy coming off of Atherox, the god planet, and it's turned it into this sort of desert planet of just sand and like black glass. All the sand is black too. And beneath it lives two warring races called the Saurians and the Insectoids, which you can pretty much figure out what those kind of characters are between their name. Saurians get into like reptiles, amphibians, snakes, all kinds of stuff, but they are very non-humanoid. I'm not giving the snakes any feet or anything, like they literally slither around. The insectoid types, they have like, they have legs, but they also have like 20 legs, or, they look like centipedes, but they have the minds, the sentience to do things on their own. They do only do it for the hive, though. Most of the insects see their hive as God, and they don't want to help Atherox survive. They want to help their hive survive, which makes them in league with the Genosphere trying to fight him, but at the same time, they have their own priorities ahead of even that. So it's a very tenuous situation between these groups. On top of it, on the land of this sort of harsh desert place, you've got the Philanthropes, which are, I guess I would mix them between wolf and cat people. If you've ever seen the RPG called Perfect World, where there's like these giant cat people who look like tiger people, or in Dungeons and Dragons, I think there was a group called the Rakasha, and they're like tiger people, I want to say. Trying to keep this all together in my mind is very difficult. And then in between there, I have one last group that lives up in the sky called the Kowloon, and the Kowloon live in what's called cloudboar, which is like made into these super heavy, ultra dense clouds that have been made from kind of the pollution of the people who used to rule this planet before, but they've been able to make like sky cities in there. And they're not like a skyship, airship type Final Fantasy living group, and most of them are all different types of bird features. So within these species of Kowloon, Philanthropes, there's, subspecies. So for example, even the insectoids have like Thoraxians, which are like almost like giant beetle people who can fight. So I always felt like if you're gonna make the option of letting people play the monsters in games, because that's really what a lot of these are, they're the monsters in other games like Dungeons and Dragons. They would always be like, oh, they're these tribal, mindless drones that fight for some sort of queen within a tribe, and they don't really know how to make their own civilizations. I always hated that. And then they would make a book that would be like, oh, but you can also play these as classes and races. And it's like, yeah, but how would that work with fighting alongside heroes who are like, I want the good of the whole universe. I don't care about a queen or a country or a nation or an empire. I'm fighting for everyone because I'm neutral good. Well, I'm chaotic neutral. I care about how do I do anything to make my queen survive because I'm a bug or I'm a cat or I'm a tribal non-token, and I thought if I'm going to let these characters exist in mine, I'm going to give them their own thoughts, their own sentience, their own mission statement, and full manipulation. Like you can even design clothes for them. They have, even within my worlds that I've made, they've got like their own like vegetables and plant life and vegetation and rituals and religions and even government, every single little country, city, ward inside of these. And then without that, outside of all that, if there's anything I haven't included in this giant galaxy that I've made up, I made it part of a place called the Omnigalactic Ultraverse. And there's really weird stuff outside of there. There's planets that are completely holographic universes. There are planets that are nothing but lava. There are planets that are nothing but an ocean. And these are real planets that exist, even within our own many infinite galaxies within the space that we live in real life. So why would you not put these into games? If you have an ocean planet of just purely ocean animal and intelligent life, like in Dead Space, why would you never have that in these RPGs and stuff like that? Now, of course, including them and writing the giant lore behind all this hasn't been done outside of Grimstar, but within Grimstar, I've done 10 years of work, a decade of work, book after book after book, and you'll probably see that in the artwork here. Now, my question for you after ending this giant video, and yes, we're coming to an end, how should I break this down so you yourself can sort of eat this in small chunks as far as the information goes. Should I go planet by planet, species by species, race by race, culture by culture? Did you like what you listened to today? Are you like, Scott, this is great that you do this. I'm glad you gave us an update. We don't need another one for another year. Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, I'm Unrested. I'll talk to you again soon.